5 major things that I found or that I discovered in Revelation as I read this week. I want you to look out for. Basically, Revelation is a full-on book, and there are 5 things that Revelation is full of, okay? I'm going to start with number 1. This will take me the most time. The other ones will be a lot quicker. The first thing Revelation is full of, it is full of language that is both highly symbolic and highly structured. Highly symbolic and highly structured. Now, as a New Testament book, Revelation really is a standout. It's a prophetic book full of symbolism and spiritual, mystic type of language. But for people like you and me that have read the whole Bible this year, the last 50 weeks, we've come across many prophetic books, and it's really not much different to them. It's very similar to Daniel. It is very similar to Ezekiel. It is very similar to parts and portions of Zechariah. It contains a lot of Isaiah language and Jeremiah language and Hosea language, okay? It's a prophetic book, much like all of the prophetic books that we have read so far. So we're used to that symbolic, exaggerated, sort of mystical language coming out. It shouldn't come as a surprise to you when you read it. But those 3 things you need to keep in mind that I did on that extra video on how to read the prophets, okay? Prophets are messengers, mindful, and messy. They're messengers of the courtroom. They say what they see in heaven, and they're messengers of the covenant. Okay, their language is rich in covenant. They pronounce the blessings and covenants of the covenant that is applicable and that is in play. They are mindful of their audience. They know who they're talking to, and they structure their speech accordingly. And John definitely knows who he's talking to. He is talking to Christians in the 1st century that speak or read Greek and that are most likely of a Jewish origin. Okay, so that seems very obvious. He knows his audience. And thirdly, prophets are a bit messy. Okay, the books aren't in a linear chronological fashion. It's not like reading the book of Acts. That's just like a straight line. Prophetic books can go all over the place, so be prepared for that as you read Revelation this week, all right? But that being said, Revelation is very structured, okay? It might be highly symbolic and spiritual and mystical in its language, but it is also very, very structured. And I see 5 main portions to the book of Revelation. The first thing is the introduction, okay? The introduction of the letter. John's on Patmos. He gets a revelation. He says it comes from God, from Jesus, to him through an angel for the churches. Okay, so maybe that's why Revelation is so confusing. It's like a big book of Chinese whispers. But anyway, that's the introduction. The second thing is it contains 7 letters to real churches in Ephesus and Laodicea and other places. We should be familiar with some of those names. Paul wrote at least to 2 of those churches, as I just mentioned then. The third thing is it has 3 sets of 7 judgments. Okay, and this is a big part of the book. It goes from chapter 4 to 16. It starts with 7 seals on a scroll that Jesus opens. That should remind you of Isaiah and Daniel, both of whom had prophecies on scrolls that they were told to seal up. Well, here's Jesus opening these 7 seals, all right? It's followed by 7 trumpets. They also are judgments, but there's 7 trumpets. It reminded me, as I read this week, of Jericho. Okay, you remember Joshua, when he marched around Jericho, they blew 7 trumpets by 7 priests on the 7th day 7 times. Okay, so that should remind you of that. Okay, it's a judgment of trumpets. And the third thing is 7 bowls, which are 7 plagues. Okay, and these are all basically judgments. Okay, it's pretty obvious what they are. They are described as being judgments on the land or on the earth, depending on your translation, and they invoke a lot of language that you'll be very familiar with from the Old Testament. They talked about the same language that God used when he judged Israel in the north and Judah in the south. Okay, remember in that era. They used the same language as the judgments or the plagues upon Egypt and Cush and Tyre and Sodom. Okay, all this very similar language comes out. It is rich in covenant language. The idea of number 7 is very covenantal. Okay, you remember in Moses, he said to the people of Israel, I think it's Deuteronomy 28, he said, one of the blessings of your covenant is that your enemies will come to you in one direction, but I'll attack them in 7. They'll flee from you in 7. Okay, so God's enemies are punished 7 times. But he also says the covenant curse of the Old Testament is that if you keep on sinning, I'll punish you 7 times over, Leviticus 26. So this very covenantal language of blessing and curses involves the number 7. Now there's 2 very big questions about these 3 sets of 7 judgments. The first is this: do they happen consecutively Like one set, two, and then three, and they happen all in order? Or do they happen concurrently, like one on top of the other, where basically those three judgments are all happening at the same time? It's just three ways of saying the same thing. Well, read it both ways and see what you think. Keep that in mind. The other thing to keep in mind, the second question, is are these judgments global or are they local? Okay, we've seen as we've read other prophets that what sounds global to you and me is actually, practically speaking, very local. Okay, we've seen that in a number of prophets as we read. In John, who wrote the Gospel of John, apparently, we noted that when he uses the word world, sometimes he's not speaking of the globe necessarily, he's speaking of the Roman world or the Jewish world. He's very local in his mindset. It was the world as he knew it. When you and I think about the world, we understand the globe. Okay, we've got Google Maps. We know about Antarctica and Australia and Africa and America, etc., etc. They didn't know that back then. Their world was their patch of land. You might say, well, what about every tribe, nation, language, and tongue? That's global. Well, not necessarily. You remember Daniel, when Nebuchadnezzar made a law for people to worship his statue. He wrote in that law that the people of every nation, tribe, and tongue had to worship him. Now, that wasn't written to people in Fiji. That was written to people in his locale, and he describes them in his kingdom of every nation, tribe, and tongue. King Darius does the same. The Persian leader writes a letter, and he addresses it to people of all the nations, tribes, and tongues. Okay, that's the language of the Old Testament. It's largely speaking of something local. So that's a real question. These judgments that come, okay, do they happen consecutively or do they happen concurrently? Do they happen globally, like you and I understand the world, okay? Or are they speaking of local judgments? Keep those two things in mind as you read. So that's the third main part of the book. The fourth main part of Revelation is the contrast between two women, two wives, okay, who are also two cities. The first wife is adulteress, okay, and we're actually first introduced to her, if I'm reading it correctly, in chapter 12. She is a woman that gives birth to a son. The dragon attacks the son, but he's taken care of. Then the dragon attacks the woman, but then God protects her for a certain period of time and places her in the wilderness. Well, here in chapter 17, she comes back to us again in the wilderness, and the very dragon that was attacking her 5 chapters earlier, she's now riding on top of it. All right, that very dragon that was attacking her Christian children, she is now sitting on top of that beast, drinking the blood of those Christian children. Okay, so here now, she's not a mother giving birth, she's an adulterous wife. She's an adulterous woman full of adulteries, and she is burned with fire. She comes down in a single hour, it says, and all the people look and go, wow, this is amazing. How could such an amazing city called Babylon, okay, it's code for a particular city. How could this city of Babylon come down in only a single hour? What a devastation that is. And of course, before that happens, God says, come out of her, my people, do not share in her sin. So you've got this adulterous wife. She is directly contrasted to a virgin wife. All right, no sooner does she die for her adulteries, is punished, penalized for her adultery, then a new wife comes onto the scene that comes out of heaven and is married to the Lamb. She's a virgin, she is beautifully dressed, and her name is not the new Babylon, okay? Her name is the new Jerusalem. She is a city, she's a cube, okay? That's the measurements of the city, 12,000 by 12,000 by 12,000, a lot of 12s, okay? In that, the walls are even 12 by 12 thick, 12 times 12 thick, okay? And it's got 12 foundations and 12 gates, Old and New Testament leaders, blah, blah, blah. You're going to see all that this week. But it's a cube, and that's meant to remind us of the most holy place in the temple, okay? The temple had a structure, but the most holy place where only the priest could go, where God dwelt with his people, okay, that was shaped as a cube, and the whole city is shaped like that. It doesn't have a temple because God and his people are there. It's a new covenant wife. So we've got this contrast between these two women in the fourth major part of the book. So we've got the intro in chapter 1. We've got the letters in chapter 2 and 3. From 4 to 16, we've got 3 sets of 7 curses. From 17 to 22, we've got the contrast of the two women, the two wives, the two cities. And in the last part of the book, we have the epilogue, okay, the final goodbyes. Jesus 3 times said, I'm coming soon. John twice says these things are about to take place, okay, about to take place, and the end is near. In fact, the angel says, don't bound up this prophecy, mate. Don't be like Daniel, who was told to seal up the prophecy. No, because these things are about to come to pass. So that's the first thing I want you to notice, all right? That's only that one point so far. The one point is, it is full of speech that is symbolic, but it is also full of speech that is highly structured. John took his time to write this book. The second thing Revelation is full of is Old and New Testament quotes and references and allusions. Some people say over 300. You're going to see it all over the place. And if you've read the Bible with me through this year, you're going to notice heaps and heaps of references, covenant references, okay, judgment references all over the place, creation references, they're all there. You're going to notice them in spades. The third thing you're going to notice is that Revelation is full of detail, eyes and numbers and horns and heads and beasts and colors and measurements. Don't get lost in the detail. I say this to you all the time, all right? There's lots of detail. It's full of detail. Don't get lost in the detail. Don't go down rabbit trails. Try to keep reading the book and keep the big picture flowing, okay? That's how I believe it is supposed to be read. The last thing, or the fourth thing, sorry, it is full of both things that are very sure and things that are obscure. Things that are clear and things that are obscure. I mean, it seems quite clear to me that this book was written by John, a very real John, who was on a very real island to very real churches who lived in a very real time and place. That seems pretty clear to me. But there's also a bunch of stuff that's really obscure. And that's just how the prophets are. You and I know that after 50 weeks, okay? Prophets are obscure. And there's a lot of uncertainties. Yes, John wrote it, but which John? Was it the Apostle John, or was there a difference between the Apostle John and the author John? Well, church historians have been divided about that. Yes, he was on Patmos, but how did he get there? Some people believe he was banished there by Roman authorities, okay? But the Bible itself doesn't say that. John doesn't say, I was banished to Patmos. He just says, I was on Patmos. It occurred to me as I read this week, what if he went there voluntarily? What if he went there because he was running away from persecution on the mainland, hopped on a ship and got away, like Paul was lowered out of a basket out of Jerusalem, or at the middle of the night escaped Thessalonica because of persecution? What if John did the same? What if he was on Patmos, not in a prison, but on there living on one of the villages? That's why he had so much time to write down the whole book. Okay, he may have been there on his own accord. We don't know. We also are not sure when the book was written. There's two main views about that. Was he on Patmos and given the revelation sometime in the 60s or the 90s, okay? And depending on when it was written, gives a really different understanding of how or what the book could mean. If it's written in the 60s, then it seems to be he's talking about the persecution of Nero that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. The city that was destroyed in that period, the land that seemed to be cursed and wiped out with fire in that period was the land of Judea. Okay, it was Jerusalem. That means that Jerusalem is the harlot. She is God's unfaithful bride, all right, that God is judging with Old Testament sevenfold judgments. It means that Babylon is Jerusalem. Well, the beast is like seven heads. It's like the seven emperors of Rome, but 10 horns. Well, who had 10 horns? Well, the Jewish zealots did. When they claimed independence from Rome, they divided up into 10 governors to rule Judea. So maybe the beast is a conglomeration between the Jewish zealots and Rome, who together destroy the city, okay? And we know particularly in that war, when I did that video, it was mostly the Jewish zealots, actually the civil war, that destroyed them. Well, if the book was written in the 60s, that seems to be the most obvious understanding. But what if it was written in the 90s, like a lot of people believe, and there is some evidence for? Well, who knows, okay? There was no city in the late 90s that was destroyed by fire and wiped out in a day. Okay, it may have been Rome, but that really wasn't destroyed that quick. Well, could it be the Roman Catholic Church? Could it be a capitalist society or a communist society? Could it be an Islamic society? Could it be something else that we had not seen yet on the earth? Well, it's basically open slather. If the book was written in the 90s, we can really bring any interpretation to it and see what matches. So reading it, understanding the dating really changes your perspective. And I'm going to encourage you this week, if you've got the time, to read Revelation twice, all right? Read it understanding, okay, what if this was written in the 60s? What would it mean? And then read it, what if it was written in the 90s? What could it mean? Okay, and you might have two very different understandings that come through. My point is simply this: the book is full of things that are clear, but it's also full of things that are not clear. And one of the things that's not clear is the dating. The last thing, and the most important thing that Revelation is full of, It's full of language that's both highly symbolic but highly structured. It's full of Old and New Testament quotes. It's full of detail. Don't get lost in the detail. It is full of clear and obscure things. But lastly, and most importantly, it is full of Jesus. Revelation is full of Jesus. He has over 30 names or titles or designations in this book. Look out for them. Look out for the names of Jesus. They are really important, and profoundly, the name that is given more than any other name in the book is the Lamb of God. Okay, Jesus is called the Lamb more than any other name in this I think it's about 20 times in 22 chapters, which is profound because that means Revelation in more ways than one takes us right back to Genesis when the Lamb was slain and on the mountain of the Lord it was provided. Okay, that's it. They're my 5 things I want you to look out for as you read Revelation this week. Congratulations again. Read it in one sitting if you can. I actually listened to it on audio this week when I drove to the city, and the guy reading it took about an hour. Okay, so you might be able to read it in an hour. If you read it in 2 halves, do that, 1 to 11, then 12 to 22 is a pretty good break there halfway through, and maybe even read it twice, okay, with the dating in your mind. If it was written in the 60s, what could that mean? If it was written after then, what could it mean? Okay, that type of thing. So give that a go. You're really going to enjoy it this week. Don't get lost in the detail, and thank you again for joining me. Keep your eye out for new content, new videos coming sometime during this year. I certainly hope so. And as I said on the title of this video, this might be the end, but the end is just the beginning. Bless you guys. So glad you joined me. That's it for today's lesson. I really hope you enjoy your readings this week. Remember, allow yourself time to read as much as you can in one sitting. Don't get lost in the detail. Just keep going and watch the Bible's big story unfold before you. Remember also to hit me up on our social media channels or website, and I'll see you next time.